So our first extended look at AC Mirage has just wrapped up, and it looks better than expected. In fact, I was really into it. There was also some AC Nexus and Jade stuff, but really Mirage took center stage, so for the sake of concision, we'll get to that in a future video. So the story trailer. This opens with a really solid establishing shot of the round city that looks prime for parkour. You can see a real variety in elevation levels as well as clusters of density. You do have some wider streets here and there, but those are connected by structures like this one as well as planks. They seem to serve as this game's rope wires, kind of riskier choke points connecting blocks of buildings that I'd imagine you can be shot off of. Although rope wires are also in one of these trailers, so I guess those are there too. We can see a pretty big number of hiding spots, and also there are what looks to be braziers dotted all around the city. I assume guards will be able to use those to call upon one another in the midst of a chase. Next, we see a scene of a younger, robeless Basim, presumably taken from the first hour of the game. Rashaan comes and saves him from two guards, and this is consistent with the cinematic trailer, which repeatedly depicted Basim as being of questionable competency, while Rashaan is clearly very good at what she does. We also get a pretty decent look at her robes here. They're kind of Altair-esque, with the shape and the white-red color scheme, but there are some minor differences that probably speak to Rashaan's character. Unlike Altair and from some screenshots, Basim, Rashaan wears a big insignia on her belt, and she also has a generally more armored look. We can clearly see a thick pauldron in this shot, and also what looks like torso armor. This isn't just different from the assassins of Altair's era, but the assassins of this one too. Falath and Abu Jafar are both much more scholarly and subtle, as you would expect an assassin to be. And Rashaan being designed as a person that values combat practicality over assimilation or sleekness, that tells me that she might favor a more head-on approach than is conventional for an assassin. Given the kind of darkness around her presentation, I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually her who got Basim into this predicament, which leads into a chase. Basim, again, is characterized by incompetency, falling into what would be a leap of faith. All of the promo so far points to Rashaan throwing him in neck deep before he's ready. I mean, here, he's literally sinking. Next, there's this scene of some assassins around a campfire, and Falath, a character we've seen a few times in promo now, explains the feather ritual that we first see in AC1. After sufficiently investigating a target, the regional bureau leader would give Altair a feather. He would return it marked with the target's blood. This explanation is intercut with a memory corridor sequence where we can see Basim staining the feather. In this scene, he's just assassinated a member of the Order of Ancients, or at least the mask would point in that direction. And here you can clearly see that this follows the spirit of more recent confessions, mainly Origins, with presentation being of the essence. There's this shot of Basim taking his target's blood with a crowd of ghoul-like silhouettes behind him. Now we also see in both this trailer and the cinematic trailer that Basim communicates with a Jinn in the memory corridor. Now naturally, many of us jump to the assumption that this was a period-appropriate interpretation of Loki's soul. If Eivor made sense of Havi by way of Odin, it would make sense for an Arabic man to interpretate his kind of sage consciousness as a Jinn or genie. That's the only thing that jumps to mind here. Now, Sarah Boyo, Mirage's narrative director, has stated that this isn't what we think it is, and that there's no mythology in the game. So honestly, I think that the Jinn is maybe just a more abstract depiction of Loki. Seeing as the game is marketing itself as a return to roots, it can't really tackle Loki like Valhalla did Havi, where there was a lot of very head-on conflict between the two, or one that involved a lot of contemporary mythology. Because Mirage's mission tacitly pledges not to touch that stuff, while also providing compelling backstory for Basim, I think that Loki is going to take hold in a much more figurative way. Basim will organically become the character he's introduced as in Valhalla, but then there's also these covert reminders that there's a sinister consciousness nestled in his DNA, and that should just work for somebody who hasn't played Valhalla. So to link back to those silhouettes, I think they're going to be used to depict Loki's growing hold over Basim in a subtle way. Maybe with each assassination their number multiplies until it is just a completely black space, but that's pretty out there speculation. We'll see on that. Here we get a real good look at Alamut and its training ground, with Rashaan and Basim sparring, her kicking him into the dirt again. And I'm certain that there's a level of antagonism between these two. Their sparring is followed by these words from a character that we haven't yet seen.
Swallow your questions, serve without complaint. Who is she to tell you when to strike?
Now, I think that Roshan's villainy is being laid on a bit too thick, and that this is likely a misdirect. We know that she's alive after the events of Valhalla's main story, and Basim comes to take on, seemingly, many of his mentor's traits. If I'm going to throw out a wild guess, I think this character speaking to Basim is well-meaning and a friend in a way that Roshan isn't. And I think that he's going to kill this friend and side with Roshan in a moment that seals Loki's negative influence. I think that Roshan actually seems to capitalize on and potentially encourage telling Basim to pour his pain into the Brotherhood. That could certainly be well-meaning, but from Roshan, I get the sense that it isn't. Generally, I think the story looks really promising, and really that's the most exciting part of the game for me. This showcase has only strengthened my optimism. Sarah Boyau framed the story trailer not with the crowd-pleaser stuff that, like, as you can tell, I'm not above, but more interesting philosophical questions. She didn't begin her introduction by invoking iconic ideas and symbols from the first game, rather the questions and philosophy that made ideas like the leap of faith and the Assassin's Creed and its tenets so compelling and memorable to begin with. She opens by asking what it means to be free, what sacrifices freedom and justice ask of a person, of a hidden one. She follows this by mentioning purpose and destiny, which we know are integral to Basim's story. He succumbs to, or at least agrees with his destiny, the fate that the Yggdrasil pre-configured. I don't want to jump to conclusions and then be disappointed by what might still be a very good story, but it sounds like Basim, a character whose future was decided for him, might be used as a vessel to explore the essence of free will and autonomy, by throwing him into an ideological conflict that he's kind of on two sides of, attaching his body and physical purpose to the pursuit of truth and liberty through the hidden ones, while his DNA, his body and soul, fight those ideas and thrust Basim towards something decisive and deterministic, a nature that is quite incompatible with assassin doctrine. Generally, Basim seems to have very little choice in this game, from Sarah's introductory words to Basim's inauguration into the Hidden Ones, which looks to be quite spontaneous and maybe even coercive. I think we have, and I'm very tired, so I imagine this comes out like fucking bullshit, but here I think we have a very compelling origin to Basim and his quite offbeat relationship with the Creed that is constantly being punctuated in Valhalla by Hytham's orderliness and kind of obedience. It's hands down the most exciting part of the game to me. I mean, everything you do serves the Hidden Ones. That's a strange kind of freedom. I think she just gets it. I was excited about the series having new writing talent, but I wasn't expecting it to be so right for this series, and for Basim too. He's such a great Assassin's Creed character, and Sarah Boyau seems to understand that and to have spoken to it. I can't wait. But the gameplay, that looks good too. Generally. This 8-minute clip is a walkthrough that reveals a lot of encouraging stuff. First of all, the opening shots. So here we see Basim's wanted poster, surely a tool to de-escalate notoriety, and there are whispers that that system is very good. The Ezio trilogy made wanted posters a pretty iconic part of the series, but they haven't been featured since AC3 and Liberation in 2012, either because the design of following entries didn't mesh with them, or because they just didn't have a notoriety equivalent. And while the strength of the actual system remains to be seen, I really like this art. The handful of AC wanted posters that exist are very detailed and reflective of their time and place. Ezio's first brushes with the lore came in the early days of the printing press, so he has this quite official looking poster with a big stamp on it and this artistic detailed frame. AC3 kinda gets too crude and practical looking posters. They contrast quite strongly against Desmond's poster in the same game, which is very starkly modern, just a passport or driver's license photo on a very plain, informative frame. The above text here reads killer and the below text reads wanted for justice. And the art here, in line with past wanted posters, is period specific and it looks great. The robe is pretty well detailed, but you can see with the face that a lot of details have been assumed or kind of miscommunicated to an artist, and I really like that. It's very charismatic art. In this mini montage at the front of the walkthrough, there's lots of familiar stuff. There's vaults and leaps of faith, but there's a quick shot of Basim using a gondola, which is great. They were fun augmentations of movement in Venice, and with Baghdad being a dense city built for traversal, I expect that those will play in quite a fun way. Now, the trailer opens with Basim looking to the southeast, where the navigation bar reveals a few things. First of all, there's a tailor up there, which was was to be expected, and there's a bag next to it, which I'd assume is just a general store. Those are probably both located in this bazaar. Next to it is this orange flower seen in Friday's promo, and as we can see later in this mission, that distinguishes targets. So it looks like we can just leave assassination contracts open. There's an assassin insignia which marks the bureau, and then there's two that I'm stumped on. There's this symbol that looks to be maybe two snakes or a split vase. I've no idea. And then there's this flowery symbol, and I have no clue on that one either. Let me know if you have ideas. Basim moves toward the bazaar, and it's pretty simple stuff that doesn't show off much flair or expression. But Basim does move with better speed than Eivor or Bayek. He doesn't seem to linger between jumps as much as they did. In the middle of this street, Basim says, "There you are," and air assassinates this guy. Now I thought this might be a witness, and Basim might be lowering his notoriety here, but the only kind of feedback the game gives is this red bar progressing from an eye to a bow. And if anything, that looks like notoriety increasing in a tiered system like what AC3 had, so I really don't know who this is. This triggers a chase, and Basim finds an upper hand by collapsing a scaffold on the run, stunning nearby guards. This is similar to something Ezio could do with the hook blade, and that's a really cool feature that adds some dynamism to ground level chases. The bar now bears this symbol, which I'm pretty sure is a wanted poster, and this red symbol looks to reflect our state of detection, glaring red when this chase is engaged and disappearing afterwards. Now no guards seem to actually chase Basim. One of the things I've wanted to see from the game isn't just parkour, but chase itself, and here Basim seems to evade guards pretty easily with upward movement alone, which is worrying. I won't take this at face value as it's showcase, it's meant to look good, the chase probably ought to be short, but there's not a lot of tension here. Basim gets away without much trouble. Now for the stiffness of parkour, Baghdad's design is, again, fantastic. Basim uses a zipline here crossing directly over a canal, and that's what I was talking about before with the gondolas as a kind of augmentation. I could see Basim dropping onto one and then piloting that into like an alcove maybe, escaping the guards. But this chase comes to a close when Basim enters a bureau by rooftop, as we've come to expect. And it looks like there's also windows up here that allow for different points of entry. Basim returns a marked feather to Roshan, Falath, and a new character, Abu Jafar Muhammad. And as you can see, Valhalla's face models and their uncanny movement remain. There is some flair when it comes to body language, but the faces are still pretty stiff. Our assassins greet one another with Alhamdulillah, meaning thank God in Arabic. So it looks like the story is going to involve religion, at least in part. And I think I'll talk about that in a future video, because the Creed's relationship with faith is very interesting, but I want to stick to gameplay here. This dialogue from Roshan reveals a few things too.
While our focus was on Al-Ghul, Fulav quietly scouted the city for where we could erect more bureaus.
Now, Al Ghul is presumably the target Basim has just assassinated, and this talk of expansion continues with Falath mentioning two hidden ones, Tabid and Rebecca. They're returning from Alamut to establish bureaus in the districts of Karch and Al Abbasiyah, and the latter of those two bureaus was featured in the last showcase. Next, Abu Jafar, who I suspect is this bureau's leader, gives Basim a blow dart, and here we get a look at our weapon wheel. Yeah. Fucking weapon wheel. There's the blow dart, whose description describes both sleep and rage darts, throwing knives, smoke bombs, and what we find out are noisemakers and traps. What's great is that the game actually communicates the limitations of the blow dart. Its ammunition, range, and duration. Having a clear idea of the functions and limits of stealth tools and variables is a great thing. There's a few titles that this kind of feature would have been very useful in. Basim walks over to the contract board. In the top left, there's three varieties of token, and I think that these are used to bribe factions. In Friday's showcase, it was mentioned that we could curry favor with factions using different kinds of currency, and I'd imagine that these are those currencies. We'll earn those by completing contracts for the corresponding groups. I say that because the dev hovers over a heist. It bears this symbol with very thievish undertones, and there's another one of these in the bottom left. The first blue heist has a blue feather symbol on it, which we can also see amongst those currencies, and the second green heist has this green symbol on it, which is amongst those currencies just the same. There's also a brown symbol with spears on it. I assume that brown is a mercenary equivalent, blue is a courtesan equivalent, and green is a thieves equivalent. This type is presumably a combat encounter, and we do one of these, which turns out to be an assassination contract. Also in the rewards are coin, a crafting component, bamboo maybe, and 2 something points. It's also worth noting that these contracts seemingly feature optional objectives, labeled here as contractor requests, and fulfilling those grants greater rewards. The dev opts for the assassination contract called the Concubine. This is a pretty straightforward assassination that has us rescuing a rebel spy. Basim passes time on a bench, taking us to Sunset. He tries using his eagle, who I guess is called Enkidu, to get some information, and he's shot down by a marksman, a new enemy archetype revealed last week. On the ground level, there's a marked group of robed people. I assume Basim could blend with these people to get through the walls, maybe with use of one of those tokens. Instead, Basim opts to climb the wall in a big, automated movement that I didn't really like. There's a handhold there that Basim just glides past in one smooth animation. But the fact that handholds are back and we aren't just climbing everything Breath of the Wild style is a welcome step forward. Once inside, Basim activates Eagle Vision, revealing not just guards but chests marked in gold. Basim skirts detection using social stealth here. This confirms that crowds aren't opted into with a button press and that we have an Ezio Trilogy-esque approach here. Coming up on 2 guards, the dev opens up the weapon wheel. Again, the fucking weapon wheel. We're told how much of each thing Basim can carry here, and it's fairly conservative. There's 6 blow darts and 4 throwing knives, and that makes sense considering the permanency of a throwing knife. But I do like the game giving us quite strict limits. It should discourage over-reliance on one consumable and will hopefully incentivize interplay between them. Basim uses a sleep dart on the further of the 2 guards. I don't see an option for him to switch to rage darts, so I really don't know how the player alternates and how convenient that actually is. After assassinating the other, Basim finds an entryway blocked by a guard. In response to this, he throws a noisemaker, a kind of cherry bomb equivalent. And I'm so glad that we have a more efficient way of manipulating guard movement again. It really looks like the bulk of Mirage's decisions exist in stealth. And there's also a chain assassinate here, which is pretty cool. That's probably my favorite newer stealth addition. While Basim climbs the tower using handholds, the eye symbol flashes yellow with a question mark. This is likely a guard discovering a body and searching for the perpetrator. The amount of communication in Mirage looks really great. Even if the game doesn't completely amend Valhalla's detection, which I'm sure it will at least improve, there's lots of really solid quality of life improvements made on that system. Basim makes his way to this big Abul-Nakad-esque courtyard. He uses that assassin focus ability here to take out 3 guards, depleting the bar in the bottom left. Now the presentation is very animus-y. You could dice this as a representation of Basim's very potent skill, but I'm not fond of it, to be honest. It's something I'll probably talk about at length in the future, but I'm not super annoyed by it. Given all of those options mentioned earlier, it doesn't feel like I'll need to engage with it. Basim opens his weapon wheel and uses a trap, a silent sticky projectile that seems to poison and stun its victim, as you can see in this very cool segment that closes the walkthrough.
Thank you so much.
Come on. There he is! Stop him! No!
Where is the son? He must face the law.
Yeah, some great stuff today. Honestly, my expectations for this game a week ago were quite middling. I liked that a different studio was heading production on an AC game. I liked that Basim was the protagonist, but I saw a lot of cynicism in the Back to the Roots marketing, and I didn't really expect the game to be able to live up to it in many, if any, areas. I think the devs at Ubi Bordeaux, a not huge studio, were given a very difficult task in making a spiritually classic Assassin's Creed game off the back of Valhalla. But as it turns out, they've made something of it. Parkour, I had the lowest expectations of parkour, and I'd say some of that skepticism has been vindicated. There's been a lack of decisions displayed. We've seen no manual jumping, ejects, move cancellations, as I think most people expected. But on the other hand, we've seen a slight increase in speed and a city whose design looks fantastic. I think the devs have made the best of a system that wasn't just parkour unfriendly, but expression antagonistic. And pretty much everything else also looks better than expected to varying degrees. Stealth looks kind of great, and so does the story. I won't do a full overview here, as this thing is already getting to be pretty long, so we'll close it out there. Also, I think it's worth mentioning that I keep talking about a showcase last week. That was the gameplay Return to Roots showcase, and if you missed that, if you didn't hear about it, I analysed that on the channel, and I'll link that in the description. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you thought of the demo. I liked it a lot, as you can probably tell. But yeah, leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you didn't, maybe let me know why. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.